Hello, it's me again, your host, Miss Suter. Today, I would like to introduce award-winning editor and writer Erin Healy. In this podcast, Erin shares truthfully about the tensions of working as a professional artist in a world where productivity is idealized to toxic extremes. Not only that, she also offers valuable guidance and advice to anyone eager to write, to express themselves, and also to address the world with much needed messages of truth and hope. Do enjoy. What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
18. Oh my gosh, I was such a different person. When I was 18, I was very, very preoccupied with having all the right answers. Like, the goal for me was to come to a place where I'd arrived at certainty about any number, whatever, you name it, whatever the topic was, I wanted to be absolutely sure about what I believed and whether it was right. And of course, that hand in hand with that was a preoccupation with worrying about getting it wrong. And so I think I would say to myself today, don't worry about getting it wrong. Just learn to ask the right questions. And maybe even, I might even go so far as to say, try to make mistakes. I think I've learned more through screwing up and making mistakes in my life than I ever did by...
Me too. Me
having
too.
stuff right.
Me too, yeah.
And certainly...
Big mistakes, not like little mistakes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like life-changing mistakes. And the fear of making a mistake really hamstrung me for a long time. So I don't think I came to that point of feeling free to totally get it wrong. Probably not until the last 5 to 10 years. It's kind of a new thing for me.
Wow.
So sometimes I look back on my 20s and 30s and go, wow, I could have had more fun. I could have made more progress. I could have, maybe produced more work. I don't know.
How did you give yourself grace? How did you give yourself grace for the making of mistakes?
I don't know that I actually went through a conscious change like that as much as I did. My beliefs changed. My beliefs about the character of God changed. That had to happen first, because as long as I believed God was punitive,
right?
You can't have both things together. Not for me, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't reconcile God is punitive and God is full of grace and love toward you. And so I think my fundamental perception, I used to perceive of God as the big professor behind the desk waiting for me to fail the test.
Yeah, me too.
That was how I perceived him. And until that changed, I don't think I could. Seeing him more as the professor who's going to go out in the field with me and walk with me while I figure stuff out. Laugh at me and pat me on the shoulder when I royally screw up and say, come on, let's keep going.
Yeah.
That was how I think I started to go, okay, I'm not going to go to hell if I pick the wrong career.
Right.
My life isn't going to be irredeemable if I marry the wrong person.
Yeah.
There was a lot.
Yeah.
And my marriage, the failure of my marriage really was hugely instrumental in that whole life experience. Hannah, that kind of gets at what I'm talking about. When you tell the stories about the experiences, I could sit here and say, oh, well, this is what I believe about God now, and this is what I believed about God when I was 18. But until you can chart the events that triggered those changes, it doesn't really make sense to anybody else. You can't communicate it very, very effectively.
True.
It's one of the reasons why I think memoirs are so popular today. They're one of the leading categories in book sales.
Really? You know, in the
Yeah.
Christian market, they're not at all, because I just wrote one on my mom who was mentally ill. You know,
Yeah.
it's trying to be honoring. And Kim Banks, who I think is with Baker Bookhouse, said,
Yeah.
Fawn, no Christian publisher is touching memoirs right now. She said, yours is different because it has questions at the end. They're little short meditations applying it to the person's life. But she said, nobody's buying those. Wow, that's interesting.
I don't know if I agree. Now, first of all, I should say it's a leading selling category in the general market.
Oh,
the Christian marketplace always still runs like 5 years behind.
Yeah.
However, I mean, two of the biggest projects I've had, HarperCollins has hired me to do 5 memoirs in the last 2 years, 3 years. So I'm working on a lot of memoirs for HarperCollins, and these are like their leading titles.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's possible. Now, Baker has never been...
they're more academic.
Baker, Revell, they've never been what I would consider a memoir publisher.
Yeah.
But it's also true that in the Christian marketplace, you probably heard Lifeway Christian Stores is closing all their storefronts by the end of the year. And so, I mean, Lifeway is still in business and Family Christian's still in business, but they're only online.
And this is Hannah's interview, but I had a sociology professor that had me come into Westmont every year and speak to their classes. And I'd say, how many of you are different in junior high than elementary school? All hands. Yeah. How many different in high school than junior high? All hands. How many of you are different now in college than you were in high school? Almost all hands. Right. And I think, the ability to think, okay, God is with us as we grow, as we change, as we evolve, as our thinking evolves, is so, but I think we have this fixed theory of perfection, that God's just in that specific moment rather than this is a scene from the movie of my life. Right. And he's seeing the whole movie, and he's with us in the whole movie. Yeah. We have this fixed frame view of God. Does that make sense?
So there's a great story that reminds me of Donald Miller. Many years ago, wrote a book called A Million Miles Blue Like Jazz.
Yeah.
And so he was writing about this basic crisis of like, why is my life not looking like I wanted it to? Moved eventually out of that. I mean, he grew through it, and he came out the other side with a really strong sense of his identity and his purpose, and went on to found this movement in which he helps people to think of their lives structured like a novel. So if your life is full of conflict and drama, this is part of how it goes. How do you become the protagonist of your own story?
Right.
And so he takes that approach, and there were all these people. In fact, I have a friend, I can't even bring up the name Donald Miller with him because he's like, he sold out to the profit mongering, of whatever. Yeah. He figured something out, and now he's selling it to everybody. Well, this is a friend who is stuck in his life, who cannot move out of a place of depression and alcoholism. So he resents anybody who does. So all that to say, the way we perceive our lives and the way we give ourselves room to change for better or worse has life-changing effects on us. Yes. So I hope I'm not getting too far away from your questions.
No,
because really, I think do you mind if I ask how old you are?
18.
You're 18. Oh my gosh. So my son is 21. And
no way, he's 21?
Sorry?
Your son? Oh, yes. Okay.
Tyler, it's confusing.
Hunter, yes.
I have a transgender son.
Yes.
So Fawn knew her as a baby. So anyway.
Yes.
So Tyler has a counselor that he sees regularly, and he told me the other day, he said the counselor looked at him and said, "You have no idea how young you are." And when Ty told me that, I said, "Well, of course you don't." I mean, I was 25 and thought I was at the penultimate part of my life. I graduated from college. Right. I had a career. I was independent. Where does it go from there, right? And to look back and realize there's so much more. It's so exciting, and it's not, I don't know if you feel pressure. I felt pressure when I was 18 to have it all figured out. I needed to have my life charted, and I needed a vision.
Because you were so competent too. I think that there's a pressure on gifted people that's not there on others. I mean, everyone has it, but I think it's more exacerbated with a gifted person.
Yeah. Oh, you might be right about that.
Yeah.
And I don't think it wasn't a pressure my parents put on me, or I put it on myself. And that was really tightly locked in with this notion that I had to get it right. I really had to get it right. That's really interesting to think about that as a creative person. Like, Fawn, how do those two things work together? How can you be absolutely right all the time when part of the point of creativity is acknowledging that you don't know all the answers and you're, trying to figure it out? I said Ted Decker has written 40 novels. Wow. I can't remember how many. If you lined them up from beginning to end and read them all in order, you would have a map of his spiritual life. Because every single novel is him, like, whatever he's wrestling with at the time, there's a reflection of that in his work. So that's what we do as creatives. We're just, I don't know if you know the poet Christian Wyman. No. Have you ever heard of him? So he's a contemporary poet. He's won all kinds of awards. He teaches. He's critically acclaimed. So Christian Wyman was diagnosed with a terminal cancer, and he's a believer. I think he raised Catholic. I'll have to go back and look at that. But all of his poetry is really focused on this, what it means to be a mortal creation. And his poetry, so it's really heavy. It's pretty dark. It's often hopeful and sometimes really angry. I mean, he just runs the whole gamut of this. He's a young person. He's only in his 30s. He has young children. And he, because of his honesty and his processing, he's caught the attention of, all kinds of non-Christians as well. So I think that work as a creative person is really important, to be honest about what we don't know.
Martin Luther said he'd misplaced his former certainties. Is that a great line?
Oh, everybody I talk to, the resounding chorus is, the older I get, the less I know.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Aside from books and poetry and the like, how have you seen the creative arts transform culture for the glory of God?
Oh, gosh. I don't know how to answer that. I am not sure that we transform culture as much as we reflect it back to itself. Now, some people would disagree with me. You might read Andre Crouch's book. Was it Fawn Culture Maker? Is that the title of it?
Andy Crouch?
Yeah.
Yeah, Andy. Yeah.
So I think he has a better vision for how we might actually transform the culture, not just through the arts, but through evangelizing. I just don't know if that's the job of a creative person. I need to think about that. I'm not sure. But my gut level is that I don't think it's our job to transform the culture as much as it is to help the culture see itself. And then through that, you get you hold up the mirror, right?
Would you say Uncle Tom's Cabin transformed slavery in the perception of slavery? Abraham Lincoln, when he met Harriet Beecher Stowe, said, "Oh, this is the little lady that caused the Civil War."
Yeah, maybe.
What do you think? It did transform hearts. We still have racism deep, deep in America, but it did. Maybe it did more mirror. Maybe it was more of a mirror than a transformer.
Well, I think that all art has the power to transform individuals. And then individuals collectively, if enough of us are transformed, then we transform culture.
Okay.
So I guess maybe I see the art as a seed or a first step. Margaret Atwood has been doing this for decades. I'm just right now listening to The Handmaid's Tale, which is a pretty horrifying dystopian story that she wrote it 30 years ago about women's rights, and I think she was just, although she was writing a futuristic story, she was imagining what things could be. She was really just reflecting cultural values and saying, these values, this is what they could lead to.
So it's kind of a really prophetic role. I guess it's a prophetic role of mirroring.
Oh, prophetic. That's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are definitely
because 1984 Fahrenheit.
Yes.
Yeah.
The science fiction and all the speculative fiction novels. Tolkien does that too.
Yes.
Even George Martin, who wrote the Game of Thrones novels, he set out to write those stories in direct opposition to Tolkien's books, in which there were happy endings and good prevails.
Yeah.
He said, no, human nature is not capable of that. And so his stories are very dark, and good does not triumph.
Yeah.
And he is one of the most amazing storytellers of our time. Really? His stories are astonishing.
Wow. Huh.
But they're bleak. They're very hopeless.
Well, I think that's really the only distinctive of Christianity is that evil doesn't triumph.
Right.
Yeah.
It's that hope.
Ultimately, evil doesn't triumph. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about perception, right? How do you see your world? How do you see your life? So as an artist, Martin is writing his perception of the human condition. And so Christians can definitely bring a different perspective to that experience.
They're all my questions.
Well, those are all your questions.
That's it? Those are great questions.
They were.
I've
learned so much from you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for letting me talk. You can tell I love to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
Fun.
Well, it's wonderful that Hannah gets exposed to your wisdom, Erin. And,
thank you.
And your process. I think the process is so valuable,
right.
Especially as an 18-year-old. I mean, nobody can believe she's an 18-year-old. Everybody thinks, oh, you're going to graduate school in London.
I thought you were in your 20s, for sure.
Yeah.
And I hope you have a fantastic experience in London.
Thank you.
And I hope all your dreams come true, even if they look different when you get there.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to the Creative Exchange podcast. We hope that this conversation has been a life-giving experience and that it propels you into meaningful, creative connection with the world around you. For more inspiring content, be sure to frequently log on to our website to find the latest podcast episodes. For now, over and out.